welcome to another edition of the Ominous Hour. Sorry for the little bit over-dramatic music in the background, but I thought it was kind of appropriate for today's subject. Where are we going today? Well, it's been a while since we delved into the topic of sacred geometry. And there have been a number of things in the recent days that have led me to want to talk about this subject, maybe in a little more detail or from a little bit different angle than I have before. Without further ado, let's talk about the artwork behind me. That's always the first place we usually start. The inspiration for that was prompt scared sacred geometry runs from God's truth. And this is what it gave me. I thought it was mildly interesting that the scarediness of the sacred geometry was in trying to basically desacredize it as much as possible in each drawing. You can see elements of concepts of sacred geometry, but totally twisted, I would say, by the spidery thoughts of a spidery AI. Anyway, not the best effort of the art AI that I've seen. We're going to call this one Circling the Squares and the New Age Cult Hares, the Sacred Geometry of the New Covenant. Where are we going here? I'm going to switch over to this screen where we're going to look at basically some of the classic ideas within sacred geometry. Let's see, how can I hide this? I'll maybe just make it a little bit smaller so you can see all the shapes. Okay, let's make sure this is coming up on the other screen. Okay. So, this is a little figure I found online. I don't think it's copyrighted. It certainly is basically duplicating a lot of stuff that many people are duplicating. So, sue me if you think I stole your idea. That goes through some of the basic geometry shapes that are called sacred geometry. This isn't by any means complete, but does illustrate some of the directions that people are going with that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what sacred geometry is. One of the things that folks have noticed who studied nature at any level found was that there were patterns to how life developed, patterns to how crystals grew, patterns to how galaxies formed, solar systems formed, etc., etc., etc. And one of the core questions has been, well, what's responsible for those patterns and how can I use them? For most scientists, they kind of get caught up into how can I use it? And this is where basically sacred geometry has led inquiring minds into a lot of dark corners of, let's say, black magic or black science, which we've seen a lot of in recent years with some of the black ops going on behind the Chinese Great Firewall coming back to really bite us. Other black ops done during the Cold War era in Russia or in secret labs for the US military have certainly tried to use these patterns and understand these patterns and especially any advanced knowledge they may have had of these patterns through occult knowledge, or perhaps alien intelligence, which is certainly much in the news today. Those of you who may not be aware would know that one of the prime motivators behind the Nazi movement in Germany was an interest in the occult. In particular, the occult as it related to Aryan symbology and its tie to sacred geometry. Okay, and well, we could go down that rat hole quite a bit, but just to give you an idea, that was a prime driver of much of the investigation of scientists of that era, just as it was in earlier eras. Sir Isaac Newton, if you study his body of work, wrote quite a bit about the occult and about alchemy, which was still a thing then and is still a thing now. There are many people delving into the occult, delving into sacred geometry as a magical practice called Hermeticism, which is presented as, oh, this is good. We're using our magic for good. We're exploring spirituality for the good of mankind. Okay, this has been a common trope and a much misunderstood piece of sacred geometry, which we are going to delve in today. Okay, so, yes. There are geometric patterns in all of nature, and they all were part of creation. However, contrary to popular belief, creation was not perfect in 6 days. Anybody with eyes not wide shut knows creation is not perfect. Anybody with half a brain would realize, you know what? If creation was perfect, if everything was static and we were all at peace and everything was stable, creation would be boring as hell. There'd be nothing to do except strum on your harp and praise God or whatever, or whack on the peons in hell, or whatever your particular fantasy of perfection is. That's not the way it works, folks. Creation has been a work in progress, a work that required mistakes to be made, required adversaries to be had. And if you delve into, and I won't go back all the way through it, I may do that again someday to take you through how creation happened from very basic steps, but we're just going to stay with sacred geometry here. So basically, during the course of creation, some patterns were established by players that were playing on God's team. Okay, these were the patterns that were growing, expanding, that were not limited or self-destructive, if you will. So, you know, there are basically 3 classes of patterns. There are patterns that are stable. They either repeat over and over and over and over again, or they just stay static until some cataclysmic event disturbs them. There are some patterns that will grow until something disturbs them. And there are patterns that will hit a limit and then become corrupted, and start falling apart. If you think of it from a crystal standpoint, there are some crystals that are very stable, such as diamonds. That's why they get the phrase, diamonds are forever. Well, those can be useful for some purposes. A stable geometric pattern, a stable crystal, can be good for lasers, things where you want to have very definite frequencies. But they are not flexible. They can't be tuned to other frequencies. And if you've ever worked in radio, for instance, understand how that works, you'll know that radios operate on crystals, or at least the old ones did. And they only had certain frequencies that they would resonate at. And that was a limitation of early radio sets, and why those were quickly replaced by transistor radios. Transistor radios were tunable crystals. The frequencies that they would emit or they would respond to could be tuned to, and that's why you have the dial on your radio set. Okay, that's a more flexible, more expandable system. That's why it was a good creation. It moved a story forward, gave humanity more creative things to do. Now, there are risks to moving the story forward, and limitations still. And every creation has a certain expansion it does to capability, to knowledge, to power, but then has some downsides to it. And this is where the whole sacred geometry story needs to lead. Okay, there are some of these schemes of sacred geometry that are useful. Most of them are useful up to a point, but they are not expandable. So let's take a look at this first trio. The egg of life is basically made up of, let's see, we can take 6 or 7 circles and put one in the middle and have 6 around them. And that makes what seems to be a very stable form. This is, they call it the egg of life here, but it's usually more associated with a rose shape, a flower shape, the flower of life. And there are some things that mirror this system. What is wrong with this system? Well, for one thing, the number of components in it. There's 7 components. This is where the magic number 7 comes from. This is a stable thing, but it is not easy to grow. And trying to grow it, you get to this so-called fruit of life, which looks like a pretty nice regular shape. But if you think about it, there's nothing really that is keeping these outer petals, this star shape, together. And if you tried to put more circles into it, you would not get, well, I guess you could get a regular shape by putting more circles there. That's one way of looking at it. But this is not what the fruit of life worshippers chose to do. They made this kind of their magic symbol, the 6-pointed star, and drew from it, we can make Metatron's cube out of that. Isn't that perfect? Except it's not a cube, is it? It's It's an attempt, but again, it's not something that takes you very far. And the Metatron worshippers are basically cultists of one particular vision of an apotheosis, if you will. Metatron was supposedly the first, the angelic incarnation of Enoch, which is a true story, but is only a small piece of a bigger story and a very limited piece. Those that worship Metatron are, not seeing the whole picture. It's a very self-centered cult, I would say. The Metatron worshippers are that, it's kind of like, well, anybody can be Enoch. All you have to do is, get pulled up to heaven by your God. And again, who is God? The next one here is the one I'm going to talk about the most. They call it the Vesica Piscis, the body of the fish, which I think is kind of interesting because you wouldn't think at first glance it looks like a fish. Now, what's the characteristic of this particular sacred symbol? Well, it starts with how many circles, first of all, do we see in this? There's one, little one in the middle. There's these two that basically are bounded by the little one. So this becomes the radius of a bigger one here. This becomes the radius of a bigger one here. And then one largest circle that is bounded by these other two. And this is one that's often quoted and used in architecture, in cathedrals and stuff like that, along with the flower motif. This motif is more part of the, I would say, the Masonic cult. And this flowery one is more part of the Eastern cult. That's why you see there's 7 circles here. That corresponds to the 7 chakras, which is, kind of the center point of Eastern cult magic, tantric magic, love magic. This Vesica Piscis, based upon 4 circles, doesn't quite hit all of the points that were necessary to understand it. And maybe that's because adding the last circle of this collection got you to 5 circles and would have been maybe getting you accused of being a Satanist, the 5-pointed pentagram, the 5-fingered beast. 5 has always been kind of looked down on spiritually, even though it's kind of represented in the number of fingers we have on our hand, isn't it? So what are we missing with this egg of life, which to me looks like the evil eye with horns. Horns going up and horns going down. Kind of what this looks like to me. I'm not sure that's the kind of fish I would want to be slapped with. Let's add the 5th circle and see what it looks like. I'm going to redo something I added. Oh, okay. So if you draw another circle, you take these intersections and you draw another circle, what do you get? Well, by God, it looks like the CBS logo. Let's just go take a look at that real quick, because that just occurred to me. I want to see if that is borne out by, if my memory is correct there. Well, CBS, Central Broadcasting System. Yeah, you were onto something very spiritual there, weren't you? In fact, you can draw that with different colors and make all kinds of eyes out of it. Okay, so, again, sacred geometry can be for good or evil. It's how you use it, how you use spiritual powers. Now, when you add this fifth circle, something really interesting happens. When you map that to the 5 characters of creation, okay? The centermost circle represents God. The next outer circle represents karma. And the outermost circle represents what? That's what is hard to say. These 2 off-center circles kind of represent duality. So what are the characters of duality, if you will? Well, I would argue that the characters of duality are Lucifer and Lilith. They're the ones that are off-center, and the big circle that encompasses all is basically the Borg, the hive mind that collects all characters once they drop out of the game. And that's what's going on with this Vesica Piscis when you complete it and add that last circle. And then you get to the number of characters that you need to do creation. 3 characters are basically concentric. They sort of form the cellular structure of creation. 2 of them are off-kilter. They provide the creative pressure, the conflict that keeps creation going, keeps it interesting. Okay, and that's why you need adversaries. And Lucifer and Lilith will always be adversaries. They are like the 2 children that can never get along in a family. And every family, I think, has those. A large family, there are always some kids that just don't get along with each other. Never will. They just like oil and water. They just don't mix. And my family was no different. This is an important piece of growth and development. The perfect family, if you take out these off-kilter members of the family, Lucifer and Lilith, you get a boring, stable, free-ring circus. Nothing's happening. That's not what you want in a good creation, okay? You don't want to stop at a trinity. You need 5 characters to make a good, growing, dynamic creation. Well, let's see. You can go from this then to talk about the seed of life, which is sort of similar. Let's see. Only it's got the off-kilter circles, not offset to make an eye, but basically centered. And again, this has its limitations. Let's see how many circles we got in this one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so this is basically another way of coding the egg of life. Again, for those that think 7 is perfection, it's not. 7 is stable, but it's boring and it's corruptible, because 7 includes the corruption. In fact, it's got 2 more corrupt elements, basically 2 more adversaries that might be good, might be evil, might just confuse you. The germ of life is a similar thing. Now, here we don't use circles anymore. We only have 1 circle, and then we have semicircles that are not completed. Okay, again, it's just a different way of drawing the same concepts, and for your own purposes, if you will. Next, we have the so-called tree of life. If you count the vertices on this tree of life, you will add up to 10. Well, 10 is a number that might, have some spiritual significance if you were very much a humanist and thought, everything should be all about 10 because I've got 10 fingers. Everything should be about 5 or 10. But then you must ask yourself, why do we have a number system, numerology system that has both base 10 and 12 in it? And in fact, why do we have very strong history and both physical and cultural history of a past where there were 12-fingered humanoid giants, or humanoid creatures that had 12 fingers, not just 10. In fact, we also have traditions of alien creatures who have 8 fingers or 3 fingers. Okay, remember the tall grays have, 4 fingers, and the small grays have 3 fingers. 3 fingers is pretty much the minimum you need to hold anything. 2-fingered creatures tend not to work very well. Other things to point out about this tree of life, you'll note that it has a strong sense of an elongated crystal, or a obelisk, or a pyramid that has some stuff buried underneath it. It's drawn upside down here to hide that fact, but this is in fact the tree of life is very much linked to a lot of the Egypt worshipping cult mythology. And if you know where the Hermetic tradition stems from, you'll know that it is linked to Thoth and the earlier Egyptian Book of the Dead tradition, the Egyptian magical schemology. Okay, so yeah, that's a place that again has 2 times 5 vertices, means that you've got basically 4 adversaries and 3 good or neutral characters. Again, doesn't really describe perfection, and those that worship this scheme as their perfection have defects. Their magic is flawed. Now let's look at the next one, the Merkaba. This is basically the basis for the Star of David, the six-pointed star, and then taken into three dimensions becomes an eight-pointed star by combining two tetrahedrons. This was considered the most holy magic, the most godly magic. Because it, being based on a multiple of 4, with an understanding that there was only one adversary, this was a way of cutting the adversary out of the game. And, well, which adversary do you cut out? Do you pretend doesn't exist? You pretend that the female-ish adversary doesn't exist. The Lilith does not exist. You keep Lucifer in the game, take Lilith out. That doesn't work very well. Or even if you think of it as a game of 6, you've got 2 trinities, and then you can leave out all of the adversaries and think you've got perfection. Okay, so all of the interpretations of religion, of mythology, of spirituality that were predicated on the idea that there was perfection already, that God was perfect, had done everything right, could do no wrong, lead you to these misunderstandings that basically try to eliminate the adversary or try to make the adversary into a good. And this is bad, right? You've got to accept that there is evil. There is an adversary to God. That adversary is the tendency of things to get broken, to become chaotic, disorganized. Entropy is an adversary. And cultural entropy is what we're facing right now. This is the essence of cultural Marxism, is trying to destroy what is already working and stable and separate it into a bunch of different pieces going in different directions. That's why we are so polarized, why we are so divided. And the idea of the people behind it is that, well, there's no evil, so we could just divide everything, make everybody happy, say, just do whatever you want, it's all good, and that's going to be perfection. According to the way they sell it to individuals, oh, you're going to have more freedom. You'll own nothing and be happy. Because Almighty One, the global government, will give it to you out of the kindness of their heart. This is the fallacy of communism. Spiritual communism has been with us a long time. And this sevenfold chakra system is basically a system of spiritual communism. It says, let the one in the center rule everybody else. In fact, this fruit of life is the symbology of the Hindu caste system. The centermost circle are the Brahmins, then you've got the Kshatriya, and the next caste out, okay? This is spiritual communism. It is not flexible. It says you're stuck wherever you're at and for this whole incarnation, and then you'll be reborn, and because you're already this caste, this kind of soul, you're going to keep being reborn as that until you become enlightened and you escape off the wheel of karma. Okay, this is the nonsense of Eastern cult religion. It's a godless religion. It's a godless religion with lots of gods. And an idea that there's a trinity of supreme gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, one of which, Brahma, is just like an amorphous source of everything, doesn't do anything. Vishnu, who does all the good stuff, and Shiva, who does all this destroying. And it's all about balance. And creation, they say, is cyclical. This is nonsense. This is anti-creative nonsense. It is an insult to God, the Most High, and a total misunderstanding of what's going on in the game of creation, which has been an evolving game. And it is a game, a virtual reality, because the soul is pure consciousness. You have to give a form to consciousness to have something you can test. If you have a great idea, unless you build it and test it, it'll just be some wet dream you had that you don't know if it's going to work or if it isn't. This is how all creation happened. Now, what was missed in this Merkaba perfection is any idea. Okay, so basically, if you thought of these two tetrahedrons in spiritual terms, the idea was that, okay, one of them represents the plane of physical existence, physical form, and the other represents a plane of spiritual form. I think was the mystical understanding of it. But it didn't encompass anything other than, okay, you've got heaven, you've got earth. I guess I need to try to get to heaven, and that's as far as I can go. And there's only one way to get to heaven, how my preacher, my priest, whatever, tells me is the right way to get to heaven. Because there's only one heaven. There's only one path. And this is not a very smart religion. It does not understand God. It thinks that this is perfection. Well, so let's talk about it. The Merkaba is a useful concept, though, so we can't just throw it out like many spiritual cults do. What's useful about this concept is the idea of a four-dimensional solid, the tetrahedron. 4 dimensions give you space-time. The static form of it, this perfect star, though, is not describing experience very well, because it's not, time is not static, it changes. Shape is not static. Things can grow and shrink. They have kind of a heartbeat to them often. So in fact, you need to think of this Merkaba as not this idealized thing, but as a physical existence that is going to be rotating and growing or shrinking or seeing different perspectives with each incarnation. And that's why you can't learn everything in one lifetime. You've got to live many times to understand physical reality. But then you go to the next layer of spiritual reality, and there's just as many perspectives to experience there. In fact, more perspectives, because there isn't just one spiritual universe. There are many spiritual universes, many gods and goddesses. There is one El Elyon, the highest God. And if you read the Old Testament properly, in a proper translation, you will know that El Elyon is a different entity than the other Elohim. In fact, if you read it in the best way, the most accurate way, you will notice that there's a word Adonai used for God in many places. This is actually the incarnated Spirit of God. When Adonai works with a prophet, this is a prophet that has been anointed by El Elyon as one of his incarnations. Not all of the incarnations of God are going to wake up completely. They're going to wake up to the reality that their incarnation puts them in. And sometimes that means that God is going to just sit in a shepherd hut all his life and raise a family maybe, and maybe get butchered by some conquering bunch, and that will be one whole incarnation. Other times it means maybe God's going to incarnate and be a shepherd and happen to go fight for the king and kill a giant and somehow wind up being the next king, the story of David. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that can play out, and the Bible tries to tell that story. What makes it difficult for the Bible to tell the story of God, El Elyon, is that not only God is incarnating. Other spiritual entities, other lesser gods, other children of God, sons of God, are also incarnating. And one of the sons of God actually was the one that invented sex as an adversarial tool. There was no sex in the beginning. It was a spiritual weapon. It was supposed to be a weapon of mass destruction. And the entity that created it, the archdemon, the adversary, Lilith, is not female. Has a female name, is often associated with female deities, but in fact is a hermaphrodite, a shapeshifter, can swing both ways. And we are seeing that aspect of the adversary very strongly again today, especially among the cults that are trying to play up these lesser ideas of magic, of spiritual power, either through the Eastern Tantric tradition or the Western occult tradition. And both of those are incomplete understandings of spiritual power. Why? Because the Macabre does not show you that there are actually 3 tetrahedrons. There's no way to add it in a way that kind of fits with this perfect picture. But that 3rd tetrahedron is the God experience. It is the experience that souls have in their own universe. Not in the physical universe of Lucifer, not in the spiritual universe of Lilith or any of the other gods who have developed to the God level and have their own universe. This is what the multiverse is all about. Started out with 3, the highest heaven, Lucifer's universe, and Lilith's universe. So in the beginning, there was one heaven, one hell and one kind of purgatory place in between. But we've come a long way since then. So has God. God evolves, God develops, God creates new plans and then casts the plans, directs the plans in his brain, and then says, okay, this seems to work. Lucifer, I want you to do final testing on it in this purgatory place. And that's where the plan is confirmed. And in the confirmation of the plan is where characters get to develop their own Messiah, their own godhood, their own universe, by basically challenging the role that they've been cast in. Okay? You get to play Hitler today. You could play that a lot of ways. You could be stupid and get killed in World War I and end your life early. Or commit suicide in the hospital after you're severely damaged by a gas attack. Or you could perhaps keep pushing on being an artist in Vienna, starving artist, and keep up with your artistic dream. There are a lot of ways you could play that character. Now, the plan necessitates that Hitler do certain things. There are must-do things in Hitler's life. Those are the Messiah actions. They're going to happen that way in the physical universe every time you play this game. But you don't have to play it that way. What's going to happen if you choose not to do what would Hitler do? Those actions are recorded in your universe, your personal universe of experience. And by building up that personal universe of experience, you shape this third tetrahedron of the Merkaba, which is a 12-dimensional reality. This is the truth of string theory. It's not 11 dimensions. It's not 10. It's not 16. I'm sorry, physicists, you're barking up the wrong trees because you do not understand that the multiverse is spiritual. It is a design. It is designed to train souls, designed to create virtual realities within which to train those souls so they can see things from different perspectives and learn. Because pure consciousness is not a good way to learn. You can imagine and imagine and imagine how many angels will fit on the head of a pinhead, or any sort of mathematical nonsense that you want to, and you can fill a wall full of equations and stuff based upon any dimensionality you want. That doesn't make it reality. What makes it reality is a purpose. And creation has to have a purpose or it would not happen. Let's see, what else do I want to mention here? One of the things I found here that I kind of like to talk about is this next one, the 64 tetrahedron. This is basically an extension of the idea of the Merkaba that ends up having 64 vertices instead of 8. And this is very much tied into the creation story, especially in the current generations. Machine language if you know anything about computers, starts with binary, 2-bit language. Now, as I said, 2-bit languages are not very useful for creatures because if you only have 2 fingers, you have to use both hands to pick up anything. Not a very useful configuration. If you have 4 fingers, well, let's see, let's leave out this one. If you have 4 fingers, why, you can do almost anything that a 5-fingered creature can do. Even if you have 3 fingers, you can do almost anything that a 5-fingered creature can do. Why have more fingers? How would that evolve? What sense does it make? It makes sense because it is a spiritual construct. The number of fingers we have drives our number system. The 3-fingered creatures and the 12-fingered creatures that created them had a base 12 numbering system. Base 6, base 12. The 4-fingered creatures and the 8-legged creatures had a base 8 system of numbering. A little bit more advanced than 2-bit. 8-bit computing was their specialty. Because of the number of fingers they had, they developed computer technology more quickly than other species. You might think that that was an advantage, but actually not, because computer technology goes hand in hand with other technology, and with computers come things like atomic bombs, EMP weapons, all kinds of destructive things. And our species has been the one who has navigated these challenges in a way that was necessary for this experiment to complete. Why do I say that? Well, let's think about it. So if you were a highly technological species, especially one that did not need sex to reproduce, you might very quickly develop the technology to get away from the planet, explore other planets, send out probes, robotic vehicles and whatnot, and get very far technologically. However, you would not be inclined to develop very much spiritually. Material things would come very easy to you, and you would easily forget that there was anything but living and dying, and trying to make sure that you live longer than the things that you were making die. There are many people who have that mindset, and it is extremely dangerous if it gets out of the lab. These are viral species who basically kind of have a social Darwinist idea of perfection. The survival of my species or my kind, my model of robot, is paramount. And these are indeed the people who basically worship DNA. They worship their own DNA above anything. In fact, they worship their own DNA so much that they want to basically clone themselves, copy their brain because they think the brain has everything, and live forever because they're doing all right. I'm a billionaire. I deserve to live forever. You see where we're going with this? There have been other species like that, and they are not the good guys. The end result of a species like that might be conquering many solar systems, especially since there may be other species which are more spiritual. Okay? A species that has 3 or 5 or 6 fingers on each hand is going to be a little bit slow to develop computers. Now actually it turns out that base 10 is a better basis for numbers than 12, and that is why we ended up with the predominance of base 10 numerical systems. The only place we use 12 anymore is, you know, those silly Americans holding on to their feet and their miles and such things. And in geometry, the circle of 360 degrees. In time, the day of 24 hours, or the half day of 12 hours. The seasons, the months, 12 months, which are hard to get to line up with the year. Easier than lining up with the moon, which comes closer to 13 months. Some cultures have a 13-month calendar because they are lunar. And that dichotomy has been an important piece of our spiritual and cultural development. Some cultures revere the sun more, and they tend to match their calendar to a solar calendar and have 12 months. Some match the moon, and they tend to have a lunar calendar with 13 months. And if you know anything about Islam, you will know that Ramadan is based, the Islamic calendar, and Ramadan is based on a lunar cycle. That's why the holy month of Ramadan shifts so much. It's constantly shifting because it doesn't line up with the solar calendar. And it's quite interesting that this year and next year are quite strange in that the holidays of all the Abrahamic faiths sort of line up. In fact, next year they really line up quite nicely. Let's take a look at that. That's another thing I wanted to cover here. Let's see. Let's look at Ramadan 2025 first. Okay, so that is Friday, February 28th through Sunday, March 30th next year. Let's contrast that with Easter 2025. Well, my goodness, Easter is April 20th, the exact day that Ramadan is over next year. Let's take a look at Passover. The Holy Week of Judaism. Well, I'll be darned, April 12th through April 20th. Well, April 19th in Israel, okay? But in general, those three line up. And interestingly enough, they line up with another very important day, which was a very important day this year too, which I've already talked about, April 21st, which is the birthday of the Messiah. Really is. The Saturnalia is nothing to do with God. The Saturnalia Christmas festival is about a child of God. Not about the solar deity, but about the Saturn deity. Saturn is one of the planets. Not even Jupiter. At least Jupiter is one that has had an incarnation of God. That's why Deus Pater is called Jupiter. That's why that planet is called Jupiter. That's why it's the largest planet. It was, after the Sun, the first planet that God made the center of the latest creation experiments. Okay, and if you've listened to my other talks, you know that was an era when God was working on elemental creations. Earth, air, fire, water elementals, and all of the different types of energy and elements that we see in nature. Those were experiments being conducted outside of the sun using components in environments that were not at these super high temperatures of the sun. Okay? This is how the Messiah moves, how the center of creation moves as God moves on to new experiments. It's all been about this chosen system since the bigger experiments gave us the Big Bang. Okay? The whole point of the Big Bang was to give God this nice little playground out here on the end of the Milky Way. His own little private lab where he wouldn't be disturbed by all the other children playing the game that they'd given him. Throwing galaxies at each other, throwing planets at each other. He chose this little place here and arranged for it to form eventually into this solar system that has been his target audience for a long time. Next year is going to be a very special year, just like this was a very special year. It's going to be a milestone year for the Messiah. It's going to be the big 66, which is going to get people talking a lot about whether Christ is the Antichrist or the other way around. And that's the way it's supposed to be, because there will be conflict. There will be no consensus about what went down in the apocalypse. There is still going to be a lot of turmoil, a lot of angst, religious angst, and technological angst, because we will be discovering that we are not alone. This is one of the big things that's going on right now that most people aren't paying attention to is, yes, we are getting very, very close to disclosure and finding out that we are indeed not alone. And there's an incredible amount of interest in this planet, in fact. Much more than you would think there should be if we were just a little speck of dust in the middle of a universe that had tons of planets that were as special as ours. This is bullshit. This is nihilistic bullshit being spread by atheists. Atheists are Satanists. They, by denying God, by not being at least humble enough to say, I'm agnostic. I don't know what's true, whether there is a God or not, whether there's a higher power. So I'm going to sit on the fence. That's the humble thing to do. atheists are not humble. They pretty much start their whole belief system by violating the first commandment. What's the first commandment? Anybody remember that? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now, why would it say that if there weren't other gods? Is what I ask monotheists. There are other gods, and they're not all good guys. They're not all playing on God's team. In fact, there is a growing number of gods in the multiverse, playing closer or further from God's team, as I talked about in my last presentation. We're heading into the big one. This next year is going to be humanity's moment of truth. And the outcome is already a foregone conclusion. It's already been played out in God's mind by the senior creators. The strange thing about this time is that God wasn't there planning. God had already checked out and was incarnating. So God doesn't even know exactly how it's all going to come out. And that's part of what is going to help reveal who the big M Messiah is. It's going to be interesting. I have a theory, and I am telling you my theory here, and it will be borne out or not, and I'll go down as a false prophet, a true prophet, or maybe both, a Christ and an Antichrist, because not everybody's going to like the way it comes out. Not everybody's going to be happy with the piece of the pie that they end up getting. That's the nature of the beast. In fact, you don't know if I am correct in my description of how the multiverse works. You're not going to know which universe you're experiencing the apocalypse in. You may experience the end of days in a different universe, managed by a different god or goddess. And you won't necessarily know the difference because you can transmigrate at any time. And if you're not at a very high consciousness level, you won't even notice it. It might just be the smallest little glitch in your experience, like a mind fog or something. And, as I described, the Mandela effect is like that. When you're driving along to work and you have these times where you just kind of zone out and you pop in later and, whoa, I was just completely out of it. I'm glad I didn't have an accident. Okay, you probably did have an accident, but you experienced that in a different universe. In the one where you were either headed or in your personal universe as part of your demonstration of carelessly playing a character. You can deviate from the character's pattern consciously, or you can deviate unconsciously by self-programming yourself not to be yourself. And effectively, when we program ourselves into a pattern of automation, and that's essentially what you're doing when you inure yourself to the corporate world. You're programming yourself to a pattern of, okay, I get up at 6, I go do this, I go do that, I do a little bit of exercise, then I rush and have a cup of coffee and this, blah, blah, get into my car, drive to work, and then I've got my routine at work and I do blah, 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 blah. And then you have maybe, a little bit of time on the weekend where you actively try to break that pattern by pursuing a hobby or something like that. Okay, that's a way of life for many, many, many people in this era. And, well, you got to do what you got to do to survive, right? It's a choice, though. And whatever free time you have is your time for doing something better. And even that time you're sitting there in your car, driving along, zoning out, I would encourage you to try to do something different. Many people do. They put on a podcast. They put on an audio book. They put on a challenging music that they haven't heard before, that they're actually going to have to listen to. Those are the people that are attempting to become more spiritually adept. Even if they're not religious at all, okay? They're trying to better themselves. They're trying to broaden their perspective. And those are the ones that are going to be getting the most opportunities as a result of this special time we're going through. It's not about religion so much, although religion is an important part of it, because religion does have a God. There was a creator, and he doesn't want you to become a sinful soul. He's got enough bad children already. And yeah, the system is set up to sort them out eventually, but God doesn't want them to give you pain, to make you suffer. That's not what God wanted ever. In fact, you wouldn't have had to have a lot of this pain and suffering if the senior creators at the beginning of day 7 had said, you know what, God, this is good enough. Let's just keep the highest heaven the way it is. Yeah, you haven't played the game yourself. You didn't get to experience everything we did. You didn't get to suffer and hurt like we did. Actually, that's not true. But they didn't understand God. They didn't know that every single thing that ever played out was played out in God's mind first. God has played every single character. There's nothing, no pain or suffering that you've ever had that God hasn't experienced. Worse, multiple times, running the experiment over and over and over again in his head, till it came out right, till it came out a bigger creation than before, a better creation than before, with more good and less evil. That's how creation works. So this seventh day of creation is all on you guys. And your gods and your goddesses that you've had. The only God that you could be sure of that's mentioned in the Bible is El Elyon, God the Most High. That is describing, albeit with maybe some cultural Marxism, the time before God incarnated for the first time as a human. Okay? God has woken up in other species during the course of the 4.5 billion years of day 7 of creation. But every time that wake up happened, it was kind of like Goldilocks waking up. The 3 bears weren't ready yet. The porridge wasn't just right anymore. The bears chased her out of the house. However you want to read that story, that's basically what happened with all the previous chosen species. And yes, the reptilians were a previous chosen species. The dragons, draconians, were a previous chosen species. The Elohim were a previous chosen species that God incarnated in. They were the last chosen species that God was fully conscious in. Now, he didn't let on when he was Zeus, when he was El Elyon, any of the other names, Brahma, that he had. He didn't let on, didn't give away his identity. Pretended he was just another one of the Elohim so that he could observe, not give away, because all during this day 7 of creation, the family has been trying to kill God, trying to usurp his position. Let's put him away out of this species, then he's going to have to be born again and grow to consciousness again. This is what I call the adversary's game, is a game you could describe as Whack-A-Messiah. The adversary is trying to kill or corrupt Messiah candidates. And that's not just God. That is all the little m Messiahs who are getting their chance to play a Messiah role. I call it earning your Messiah merit badge. Okay? If your passion is rap music, for instance, kind of music I hate, but yeah, there is a God of rap music. There's a lot of competition right now for that particular godhood. And there are bad rappers, there are evil rappers, and there are good rappers. Ones that either play with faith in God or against God. Ones that are playing for the woke cult, or ones that realize, boy, this globalist pop celebrity woke cult is something really bad. It is causing our society to collapse, causing us to give more power to the assholes at the top. That's not a good thing. That's not how God works. If you think that you're going to be better off under some almighty, micromanaging, super God power, you're stupid. And I don't mind telling you that. Yeah, the multiverse needs stupid souls, but we don't need them in the chosen species. If you are stupid, you're going to get marked as a beast. You won't get to come back as a human again. Or if you do, it's going to be on some other planet, in some other future, or some other past. And that's okay. You know, you don't have to earn your wings in this incarnation. The vast, vast majority of you will not. But you should try to learn something, and you should try not to be the worst kind of beast that you could be. And the worst kind of beast you could be is a dumb beast. A lemming is a dumb beast. Just follow the crowd. Me too! Oh, everybody's going over that cliff. Let's go with them. And that's a dumb beast. The sheep is a dumb beast. Sitting in the pen, fat, dumb, and happy. Oh, they just want me for my wool. I'll let them shear me every year. Or they use the chive analogy in China. Cutting the chives is how they talk about existence as a dumb beast in China. And many are just reconciled to that. Well, it's just my fate, it's my karma. This is Eastern cult nonsense. You can change. You have a chance to change the future. You don't have that much chance to change the present. You can try to. You may get killed for it. That's better than just sitting back and doing what you're told. If you're told to do something evil, if you're told to witness something evil and call it good, that's a sin. You're not being a good guy by going along with it. This whole nonsense Eastern idea of three wise monkeys that see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil, those are evil monkeys. Those are stupid monkeys. Don't be a stupid monkey. Now, it's not always easy to detect what evil is. And this is why they send so much propaganda your way, trying to make out like, oh, see, this is what happened. That means this is evil. And you have seen that in spades recently with the counter-propaganda, the propaganda, counter-propaganda around the Israel-Hamas war, the Ukraine-Russia war, the transgender insanity, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, you name it. There are so many themes to this nonsense. MAGA is another dividing psyop. Okay? Don't fall for this shit. I promise you, Donald Trump is not the Messiah. He's got a little bit more going for him than Comrade Biden, but they're both evils. Absolutely, they're both completely puppetized by their, Trump's not a puppet, but he wants to be a puppet master, and that's just as bad. He can be a tyrant. It's obvious in how he does politicking that he can do evil and smile. The way that he attacked his best competition in the primaries, Ron DeSantis, was evil. He's still attacking Ron DeSantis because he knows he's the best fucking Republican they have. Just like the Democrats are all attacking RFK Jr. It's not going to be a very fun election cycle. And unless something really, really monumental changes before the election, we're going to be even more divided than before. I wouldn't be surprised if something very major does change. But I'm not going to make any prophecies there because I do not know. I only know about events that I am personally involved in, that are part of my Messiah mission. I don't know if my Messiah mission is going to last, or for how long it lasts, or when I get to move to the other side and start creating in my own universe. I'm pretty sure I'm not there yet because I'm not in control of anything. I don't have any magical spiritual powers. I can't push buttons with my head and make things happen. At least not consciously. So I'm pretty sure that I'm still in the physical universe. But I also know for absolute certain that when this journey is over, I've earned my Messiah merit badge. I've seen all my signs. I've done all my duties. I've taken all my tasks on and completed them. There's a lot of people out there that are in the same boat. They know that they've done what they were supposed to do with their life, and somehow they lived it in a way that was completing. They feel like, I did everything I was incarnated to do. That's how you know that you have successfully completed a Messiah mission. You managed to hit all the squares just right. to accomplish what you were supposed to do in this scenario without sin, without stepping on things that you didn't need to step on. Okay? That's what separates the good Messiah from the anti-Messiah. The evil Messiahs step on things that they don't need to because they like stepping on things. They will take shortcuts because, oh, well, I want to make my life easier. So I'm not going to do this thing that I know I should do because it doesn't benefit me. Okay? That's how you fall off the wagon. That's how you lose an opportunity to build a better Merkaba for you. If you don't do anything, if you just do whatever comes to your mind, which is what a lot of these New Age cults are advocating, just be in the moment. How many times have you heard that complete fucking nonsense? It is nonsense. The only time you want to just be in the moment is if you're on a battlefield with people shooting at you, or if you're on a stage acting a part and trying to make sure that you do everything you're supposed to do to make the play come out. Okay? That is not how you win the game of souls. It's how you turn yourself over to somebody else to control you like a puppet. And that's what these New Age cults of oneness want to do. Whether they're materialist cults, like the woke cult, or whether they are spiritual cults, like the communist spiritual cults of Buddhism, some kinds of Hinduism, that, oh, there's no evil. You just got to do what you're told because it's all predestined. It's all going to happen the way it's. You just follow the rules. Do what you're told. Stay in your lane. Okay, these are people telling you to lose, to be losers. They are not enlightened. They are not teaching you how to be enlightened. They're teaching you how to be a loser. Okay, I think that's a good stopping point for this little talk. Like, share, subscribe, interact, suggest new topics, things you'd like to hear about. Till then, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour saying, happy karma.